I think at least most of you have Slido, so feel free to scan the QR code that you can see on the screen, or raise your hand in case you have any questions. Let's start with the question. Maybe I will start with my first question. What are the most prominent signs of specific neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis? So maybe we'll start with Professor Corbett.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the most prominent signs of specific neurodegenerative disease?
The most prominent
Yes.
signs?
Yes.
Signs. I'm just a pharmacist. Maybe there are medical doctors here for this. Yeah, of course, for me, maybe cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease. The first thing that the patients and the relatives will notice, and that's then getting more and more pronounced and causing more and more problems. So for me, maybe that's the most important sign.
Answer the same question.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm also a pharmacist at the moment for practice. So I'm dealing with these patients mainly when they are coming to our psychiatric hospital and they are having health issues. So either aggression, agitation, they are depressed, they have psychosis. So we mainly focus on the treatment of the psychiatric issues, but of course we have to deal with the cognition decline as well. In Parkinson's disease, we have to deal with the problem that the cholinergic medication, which we are trying to treat the patient, and if they are psychotic, we are giving them antipsychotics, which are worsening their Parkinson's. So we have to find the real right balance between these two problems. So this is also challenging. So this also worsening of motor symptoms. We have several patients with Huntington's disease because there are no let's say facilities. They are accepting these patients, so they are living their last years of their life in psychiatric facilities, which is not right, I think, as well. So we have to deal with all part of our care about these patients as well. And we see the immobility problem, dysphagia. We have to administer drugs by sonde, by PEG. So these are all the issues we have to deal with from my point of view.
Yes, perfect. So now we can proceed to Professor.
There are so many different diseases that actually, speaking about the most prominent signs, is difficult for the whole family of neurodegenerative disorders. But what I think is valuable to remember is that the difference in the current view of these disorders from, say, a few decades ago, like, for example, when I was studying medicine, is quite dramatic. And we have gone from, even though it was pointed out, for example, for Parkinson's disease, that it is still classified as a movement disorder, we do now understand that the actual symptoms and some signs of this disorder start more than a decade earlier, but are not manifested as motor clinical signs or such kinds of symptoms. And that these autonomic disturbances from constipation, orthostatic hypertension, and different things are present way before we actually see the bradykinesia, akinesia, and tremor, typical for the fully advanced and developed Parkinson's disease. And I would also point out that because of the very pathophysiology behind it, for example, the family of transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, the same type of causative agent, which is prion, has this ability to distribute itself through different networks within the central nervous system and cause disturbances that can manifest themselves in a wide variety of ways. So, from rapidly progressive dementia, cognitive decline, in sporadic Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, to, for example, variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is typically something that affected the younger people in Great Britain particularly, and had initially looked very much like a psychiatric disorder. A totally different clinical picture from the sporadic Creutzfeldt-Jakob. So it took a long time to not say much.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think my three colleagues already mentioned very important issues and addressed this question. I would like to point out that, as Professor Bersanas already mentioned, that it's difficult to just put these diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, in together with multiple sclerosis, right? It is a multiple sclerosis is in its core more basically inflammatory mediated. However, there is also neurodegeneration going on. All of the diseases happen in the central nervous system, and the presentations can vary, but we have set clinical phenotypes that go with these diseases. What is still remains the issue is how to find the disease early on before it shows its face clinically. So decades before, when either of these diseases starts happening, and also when we have the disease, how to intervene as soon as possible and as efficiently as possible to keep these people living their lives at their fullest capacity.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think it is very important to stress that the early diagnosis is key in this case, in case of neurodegenerative disease. Thank you a lot for your answers. So now, maybe we'll proceed to the audience. Do we have any questions from the audience? I can see Javier.
Hi, thanks for your presentations. I have a question. It is more or less related to this one that we got before. Just a small background. My grandmother just got a diagnostic dementia a month ago. We already knew that something was happening there, but my father decided to just tell this to my grandfather, and she's taking memantine chloride, but she doesn't know why. It is not really advanced, so she's fine, she's normal, living normal life. But my question is it a good choice to not tell her or any patient this dementia process? Is it significant to tell them that they have this process, or it depends on the patient? Thanks.
Thank you, Javier, for the question. So maybe we could start. Any other speakers would like to start?
I'll start since I'm a clinician and neurologist. You've addressed a very important ethical question, right? Whether or not to tell the patient. As a clinician, as a doctor, I am strongly bound to these ethical and moral questions, and I believe sometimes it is the desire of the patient's caregivers not to tell the patient. They come to us with certain problems and they say, please don't tell the patient. But I believe it is absolutely important to also give this information to the patient themselves. Imagine yourself, you would like to know what you have and what you're being treated for, even if it is dementia. What is hard sometimes is how to give this news to the patient and to the caretaker. So, site to make this information as clear as possible and to enable them to help them accept this disease, because if they know what they're being treated for, and even if it is dementia, you said it is not severe dementia right now, right? And with all of these diseases, what we can currently do, unfortunately, is just to slow down this disease process. But that is very important. That it's very important so that we can ensure that the patient takes the drugs in order so that we achieve the patient's compliance in taking the drug. If she can right now due to her cognitive problems, and later on the caregivers have to be informed how to deal with this, because we can just prescribe the drug and then not worry about the patient taking actually the drug, but that would be pointless, right? So yeah, hopefully I've addressed the question, or would any of you like to add to this? Or
from a candidate patient perspective, and also having spoken, for example, with my mom before her diagnosis, I think it is very important to know how much agency you want to have in your own life. We may assume that everybody wants to have full agency, but sometimes that may not necessarily be the case. And in therapeutic relationship between a patient and a physician, it's important to have an open communication and for the patient to be able to express the desire to know and to then receive adequate support, or on the other hand also to not necessarily be told if they do not wish to be burdened with that and just wish to continue living their life the way that they have before. Given that I spoke very personally before, I would say that my perspective, especially because what Dr. Sausek also pointed out, would be to try to assess the risk as early as possible and to then do all that's within my power to mitigate the risk, to reduce its likelihood to steal everything that I cherish and value about my agency in life from you. And also to then, at some point, make all the necessary arrangements for the part of life when I might not have agency anymore, and when I would like to have things taken care of for me. That is also important to be able to plan for. If you don't know, you can't do that.
Okay, so maybe we could proceed to questions from Slido. So the first question from Slido is: what are the lacking features in research and that impair the development of new therapies, such as funding, workforce, or regulatory system?
Thank you. This is a great question. A very difficult question. Why we failed to develop drugs for Alzheimer's disease? Maybe this is related to this question. And one of the options is also, is it the science itself? Maybe we failed to address the right, to ask ourselves the right questions so we could provide the right answers. And we've been chasing down this amyloid beta hypothesis for 20, 30 years. There was a cholinergic hypothesis in the 80s and 90s, which actually gave us some palliative treatment options, which are better than nothing, but the amyloid hypothesis gave us actually nothing, gave us 2 experimental drugs that we have now FDA playing around with them. So maybe the science here was wrong. So So maybe that's the answer to this question, and I think maybe we failed. We just have to admit at some point that we failed, and we should try something else, something totally different, like Monty Python. And now something completely different, and then there's another sketch.
So any of
Some of it.
So maybe we can once again come back to the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, there's one there.
Lately, I've heard a lot about deep brain stimulation in the treatment of Parkinson, and I wanted to ask, how common is this treatment, and if you see the potential of, this treatment taking over the drugs?
Thank you. It's another interesting question. How common? Well, every patient who gets diagnosed with Parkinson's gets initiated first on drugs, right? And patients who have longer Parkinson's disease have more of these maybe some troubles with adhering to the drugs, or have, as the colleague pharmacist already mentioned, have these on-off wearing effects. We sometimes offer them other treatment modalities. One of them is deep brain stimulation. However, this is not a complete cure for the Parkinson's disease. The patients need to be younger of age. They mustn't have a lot of cognitive decline. They mustn't have a lot of psychiatric comorbidities, because deep brain stimulation is a method that can worsen, like depression or stuff like that. So we need to choose these patients very carefully. And last but not least important, it is an invasive method. You need to insert electrodes deep into the brain. So it is not for everyone, and since it is not a cure, it is not addressing the disease process, right? It's not doing, it's just ameliorating the symptoms. It is one of the possibilities that these patients have in terms of treatment. However, it is not a cure, and it is only for a subset of patients. So there will need to be more advances on the etiology of Parkinson's, and how to find it and detect it as early as possible, to slow down and reverse the risk of neurons dying off and causing movement problems and everything else.
Thank you very much. I saw there is one more question.
Hi, so actually I will be having two questions, if you don't mind. It's all about Alzheimer's disease. I would like to hear your opinion about innovational medication. For example, what do you think about approaching the Alzheimer's disease with oligonucleotides, with what can change the gene expression of these diseases?
I think that every new technology needs to get a chance to be tested. So definitely, whatever new idea a scientist might have should be tested and evaluated in vitro, in vivo, in clinical studies, and so on. And then it is important that only safe and really acting drugs come to market. I'm not familiar with particular technology that you mentioned, because here in the field of Alzheimer's disease, it's an explosion of ideas, and it's a labyrinth of ideas as well, and it's just impossible to be familiar with with all of them, but of course, definitely, this field needs to be investigated. Unfortunately, the industry is moving out of it very much. You know, for example, Pfizer, who invested millions and millions of dollars into neuro fields, neuro drug discovery, shut down all of these departments, for example, and so on. So that's bad news. But it's not contributing to solving the problem, but of course, maybe new ideas, like you mentioned, this will solve the problems in the future.
Thank you very much. So maybe the last one question, and we will take it from Slido because one more question.
Yes, I had another one. So given the fact that myself also had done some research on Alzheimer's disease, we done a study where we combined the inhibitors of acetylcholinesterase with the flavonoids that can be used, that can be found in ginkgo biloba, and we obtained some really good results. Also, we are not the only one that did similar things in the world. I would like to hear your opinion about this approach.
About the approach of combining acetylcholinesterase inhibitors with flavonoids,
yes.
If I understand well. Okay, well, of course, that's an interesting approach. Just be careful about paints. Have you heard about this? These are paints in medicinal chemistry, are pan-assay interfering compounds, which are dangerous in early steps of drug discovery because they can give you false positive results because they interfere with different assays for different reasons. We don't have time to go into this, but if you Google the paints, you will find even Nature published a paper about this. And especially flavonoids were very high on the list of potential pains, so be careful about this so you don't have a false readouts when you do your research. Yeah, that's just an advice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. And now we will proceed to the last question. How does it happen that Alzheimer patients, even though their disease seems irreversible, have moments when they remember details about their life currently?
That's magic, you know.
There is also one question to Dr. Savsek. Could you please elaborate more about metformin's role in neurodegenerative disease? It was stated in the chart alongside smoking.
The metformin was on the last slide when talking about brain health. So I don't know the details of how metformin acts on the brain itself, but it has proven to be, so I'm sorry if I make any sort of mistakes here, but it has been researched very vastly in the concept of if we slow down also the metabolic issues. Metformin is used for the treatment of diabetes. So dealing and tackling with the issue of metabolic diseases, which can also add to quickening of our brain aging. So this is why metformin was in the slide, along with all the other things we have to be careful about when we're talking about our brain health. So no smoking, exercise, diet, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, everyone. So we will be slowly finishing the panel discussion. Thank you for your answers. I'm sure that they will motivate our participants to delve into the topic even more and learn more about specific neurodegenerative disease, the treatment, and what still can be done. in order to improve the current state. So thank you once again for your contributions, and thank you the participants also for engaging in the discussion. Now we will move to the second panel of this symposium. So now we will discuss how we can provide better efficacy, safety, and accessibility of the treatment for neurodegenerative disease. And therefore, I would like to invite our first speaker for the second panel discussion. And I would like to invite Ms. Evelyn Lenoho, from Policy Officer at European Health Management Association, who will present us the topic of addressing challenges in access for treatments for a neurodegenerative disease.
So hi everybody, I'm really pleased to be here, especially as we celebrate European Patient Rights Day today. Thinking on the very personal discussion like we've just had about access to treatment, this is what my presentation is going to focus on. So I am from the European Health Management Association. We are a charity that is based in Brussels representing health managers from around the WHO Europe region. Our vision is excellent health management for a healthy Europe, and our mission is to support the spread of knowledge on effective health management. So you're probably asking the question, what is health management? Well, actually, your speakers have put that really well this morning, because it's not just simply about the managers helping you get the services you need in hospitals and community settings. It's also about you investing in preventing illnesses from occurring. So this is our perspective on what health management is. So moving on to the topic of today's presentation, as you will see, I have Bruce Willis there very prominently on the slide. Just before Christmas, Bruce Willis family publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with early onset dementia. These types of diseases, as we heard, are on the rise, especially in Europe. The burden of them is increasing. We don't have any clear data about the different types of diseases and the incidence in the neurodegenerative group. I actually looked, I couldn't find it by disease category, so I was quite surprised to learn that myself. What we do know is that in Europe, the prevalence of motor neuron and Parkinson's disease is on the increase, especially for Parkinson's disease. The level of diagnosis is now increasing and outstripping diagnosis for dementia. With the demographic transition occurring in Europe, of course, each country will experience this burden in different ways. But what we do know with the health system at the moment is that we are under extreme pressure regardless of the country, and as the population increases in age and these diseases become more prevalent, because they are the third most common reason for death and disability at the moment. But as more treatments emerge for cancer and cardiovascular disease, I suppose we can anticipate that the reason for death from these diseases will actually increase. This is going to have a significant impact on health spending, and of course it's going to have an impact on you as healthcare professionals, whether you're in the industry, for pharmaceuticals, or you're delivering it through hospitals or community care settings. For workforce planning, we already have shortages ongoing at the moment. For most people who've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, most of them don't have access to specialists to get the treatment plans that need put in place. And of course, we all know the situation with services at the moment, which are constantly being cut depending on the country you are actually living into. So moving away from workforce and services, the next big issue, as I'm sure everybody has encountered some version of this title, to do with medication shortages in your own country recently. These are actually on the increase, medication shortages. The reasons why they're on the increase, it's multifaceted and it's really complicated. Given that animals can be affected by a diagnosis of neurodegenerative disease, whether it's directly or indirectly, access to treatment is significantly important. We need them to slow down disease progression, we need them to manage symptoms, and we also need them to manage any comorbidities, whether it's infectious or non-infectious disease that affects this patient population. Sorry. I just skipped ahead by accident. In terms of continuity and consistency of medication treatment, if we just look at a hospital setting, when a medication shortage arises, what pharmacists have to do is compound medication to replace that one that the shortage exists in, or find an alternative product. The problem being there is that, based on research from the European Collaborative Action on Medication Errors and Traceability, most hospitals do these processes manually. So the medication in the hospital cannot be located. So it could be anywhere in the hospital depending on the digital system that exists. This is actually quite alarming when you think of most patients are prescribed anything between 8 and 9 medications per hospital stay. Some patients are prescribed up to 30 medications, and there's 200 medicines in stock in any hospital. So information on medicine supply, demand, and shortages and critical products is unbelievably critical to be able to deliver the care that you and your family needs when you go into a hospital setting. So at the moment, from this research by Ecomet, manual activities make up most of the processes in the medication pathway in the hospital. And if we're just looking at digital tools available in that pathway, so that pathway means that when the medication comes into the hospital storeroom, it then slowly moves to the patient's bedside. So for inventory, so just to count the medication stocks, less than 30% of 317 hospitals interviewed had inventory robots to count the medication stock in their hospitals. And it's the same thing for pharmacy information systems. Less than 30% had these systems in hospitals as well. These systems are becoming more important at a European level also. With the new mandate for the European Medicines Agency, they will now have responsibility for managing and mitigating shortages across the European Union by the setting up of the ESMP, which is the European Shortages Monitoring Platform. And this means that in each of your countries, your medicines agencies will need to collect data on medication stocks and give it to EMA so they can manage and mitigate the shortage when it arises. So here is a slide I took from Hours in Data, and unfortunately the most up-to-date information we have is 2019. You might not be able to see this very clearly, but the countries who had data on the amount of critical essential medicines they had in stock was Ukraine and Moldova. Now that should come as a surprise considering what we continually hear is that it's rich Western European countries who have stronger health systems. So how is it that countries that we consider underdeveloped have more information on medication stocks than the rest of Europe? So to successfully increase access to medicines, we have to raise awareness of the impact of medication shortages on hospitals. We cannot wait for an event like COVID to break out, where I don't know if anybody saw, but at least I was living in Germany at the time. I was part of an immigrant community on Facebook. The amount of calls from Indian people looking for oxygen supplies for family members in India, is that something that we want to experience here in Europe? And I really don't think that anybody's going to tell me yes to that question. And we also need to eliminate data silos. So some hospitals will be digitalized to a very high extent, but that does not mean that every hospital in your country will be digitalized. So when medication shortages arise, we cannot just redistribute the medicine from one hospital to another. And in the hospital setting itself, if it's not properly digitalized and connected, we also can't redistribute the medicine from one ward to another. We also need to generate real-world evidence and real-time data on medicine and medication stocks. And if anybody's familiar with the European Health Data Space that's coming out, this is another challenge for hospitals at the moment. And we're talking about new drug treatment for people with neurodegenerative diseases. most of the treatments will happen in hospital settings, so we really need to have access to that data too. Ultimately, we also need to introduce traceability systems in hospitals. It's not good enough that when healthcare professionals are saying that they're overburdened, why are we continuing to do things in the old way? So for any of us here, we are part of the digital generation. Do you really want to go into a hospital and start counting the stops, especially when a crisis starts emerging? We need to close the digital divide by ensuring equitable access to digital infrastructure, and most importantly, we need to invest in hospitals' digitalization and professionals' digital skills. So thank you, and if anybody wants to contact me, there's my email address, and I look forward to any questions you might have later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowe, for this presentation and basically showing us how complex the topic of medicines shortages is. Now, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Konza, who will guide us through different aspects of ensuring safety of treatments for neurodegenerative disease.
God, there are so many of you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all here. Nice to see you. I see a full range of young, beautiful faces and some familiar faces already. And I would like to mention that this place and this organization brings me a lot of memories because I once was a part of EPSA. I am currently an EPSA alumni, so I would like to thank the host for remembering me and calling me to give a presentation on this topic here in Slovenia. And I have to mention that when I was a part of EPSA, we weren't so much present at this speaking events like you, so congratulations. And my topic of the day is ensuring the safety of treatment for neurodegenerative diseases. You might wonder why I'm talking about this topic, so I think the introduction should come first. So I already mentioned, and the colleague already mentioned my name. I'm Martin Konja from the University of Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So my first job was after I graduated pharmacy from the University of Mostar. I enrolled in a PhD program at the University of Zagreb in Croatia, where I obtained my PhD thesis in side effects and CYP enzymes. So after that, I moved to the Agency for Medicines and Medical Devices at the Pharmacovigilance Center in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that is located in Mostar. And there I worked as the head of the Pharmacovigilance Center. So today, I know that this subject is to you very boring and everything the usual, but I would like to make it a little more interesting and not so much about numbers, but about the story that as pharmacists you can bring into the world tomorrow. So talking to you these days and seeing you all here, I think that you carry in yourself the strength to be the new leaders in European health for your country and every country in Europe. So I'm currently also the head of the Pharmaceutical Research Institute in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we are involved in many projects and also the European Federation for Medicinal Chemistry, as medicinal chemistry is my primarily, I think, subject of interest. So when we come to pharmacovigilance, I almost instantly think of these beautiful monuments that we have in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Does anybody know what this picture represents, or what is on this picture? Has anybody been to Herzegovina or Bosnia or somewhere? No? Okay, then you should visit, because Bosnia and Herzegovina has the greatest number of these little tombstones that are called stageti, and they represent the people that are buried under them. They originate from the Middle Ages, from the 15 and 1400s mostly, and they always show a person standing up and being awake. So the legend says that this person that is engraved into this tombstone keeps the person under there safe, so that the person under there can sleep and can be calm, because it always has someone that is looking over them. So this is how I see pharmacovigilance. Pharmacovigilance comes from the Latin word pharmakon, or Greek word pharmakon for drug, and vigilance, which means to be awake, to be sure and to be safe. So this is how I see you, future pharmacists. You have to be awake at every moment in your working time to ensure that everybody else can be sleeping, can be sound asleep, and can be safe. So you're the one that is protecting your patient from some side effects, from some certain death points, and you are the one that has to always be awake. I know that it's a hard job, but when you accept it, I think it is a beautiful job. So the process of pharmacovigilance actually is involved in detection, assessment, understanding, and preventing side effects of certain drugs, and known and unknown side effects. So this has to be together for the entire process so it could be completed. Maybe we can translate it into 4 critical points in the pharmacovigilance process, and that is to identify risks about certain medications, to collect information for some certain medication, to have some sources for our side effects, and to make a decision whether to keep this drug on the market or to remove it from the market completely. But to make this decision is not easy. As I already mentioned, I was the head for the Pharmacovigilance Center, and you have a lot of pressures coming from the marketing or the authorization holders or pharmacy industry, and a lot of pressure from the other side, from the real world, where the side effects are happening. I think you are all familiar with the new recommendation from the European Union regarding the drug called Volcodine, that it should be removed from the market. I think Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and some other countries have it registered, but will remove Volcodine completely from the pharmacy lists. So that is not a decision that has been made overnight. There are many in other cases involved in committing such a decision, and that was not an easy decision. So what are the risks? Yes, there are some risks, but maybe this story brings us back to the 1950s and 1960s, when something called the thalidomide tragedy happened. I'm sure that you are all familiar with this tragedy that struck the entire world in the 1950s, 1960s. The thalidomide drug was administered mostly to pregnant women for making them calm, making them go to sleep when they couldn't, but nobody suspected that it shouldn't be like that, and that pregnant women shouldn't receive this drug because it has very teratogenic effects. Many children have been born like this, with cognitive abnormalities and without hands, without feet, but many children weren't that lucky. I think the estimated cause of death for children was around 600,000 children all around the world when we collect all the data. But this has to teach us something, and I'm going back to the old tombstones again, that we always have to be awake and have to be sure what are we doing to our patients. Yes, so drug approval before the thalidomide tragedy didn't require drug testing in large populations. It only required some kind of drug testing for toxicity. We have this testing today also for toxicity. It is the first of many stages in the drug approval process. But more today we focus on the last phase of the drug life, and that is the fourth phase, that is the collecting of adverse drug reactions, so it can be processed in this way. The thalidomide tragedy happened all around the world, as I mentioned, but it didn't happen in one country in the world. Can anybody guess which country that is? Yes, Turkey. Great. And one other country of the Western world. Great, United States. Sorry, Turkey. I know that it didn't happen in Turkey, but I was talking about the Western countries. So it didn't happen in the United States, all because one woman. Does anybody know who this woman is? Yes? Great. Yes, you're completely right. She was a Canadian pharmacologist called Frances Olsen Kelsey. And I think you should remember her name and remember her image. She is responsible for saving thousands and thousands of people's lives because she worked for the FDA. And when thalidomide came to the table to put it on the market in the United States of America, she said, no, I think based on this structure and based on similar drugs, that this would not be a good idea. I have seen what similar drugs have done to mice and their reproductive organs, and I think it will be the same for people. And the FDA said, okay, she's a Canadian pharmacologist, I guess she knows what she's talking about, so they didn't put the thalidomide drug on the market. They had other drugs of this kind for treatment of other various diseases, and they decided to listen to her. And that was a good decision. So she was awarded the greatest award in the United States of America, the award for citizen bravery from the President of John F. Kennedy for civil service. And she got another award that is, I think, way more valuable. And that is a clear conscience, because she died at the age of 105, I think, in 2015. So this case teaches us a lot of about the pharmacovigilance process in the world. Today we do monitoring of patients that is done, and the reporting is done mostly by physicians today. Also by pharmacists, nurses, and other healthcare providers. When I used to receive the adverse drug reaction form at my country, I was always sad that there were a less amount of pharmacists on that form, because the pharmacists are the ones that encounter patients on an everyday level. Physicians also encounter patients like this too, but pharmacists tend to not to report side effects as much as physicians, because they are fearful. They think that somebody is going to go after them, ask them questions and so on, but that is not the case. Their legal obligation in every country is to report the known side effects of drugs. And when a person, a healthcare provider or a patient reports a side effect, our job is to collect them and to analyze them by the local pharmacovigilance offices in whole of Europe, which are then delivered to the European Medicines Agency, and they collect it in the system called UDRA Vigilance System. And based on those collections and based on those side effects, we make certain decisions that regard the putting on the market of the drug or removing it from the market, or some other corrective measures. Maybe sometimes it is enough just to remove one series of drugs from the market and the other ones are okay. So how can pharmacists help? You future pharmacists, you can always have help by talking to patients and reporting some side effects that they have mentioned. They don't need to be happening at the moment. They could have happened a year ago. They don't need to be known or unknown. You can report side effects of known drugs. That is also necessary and also okay. You can consult with other healthcare providers and the regulatory authorities. You can search for some symptoms that your patients, and you can report your side effects to pharmacy industry or the regulatory itself. So when it comes to these type of drugs, what side effects to always look for? I know that this is the most common answer for pharmacy students at tests when somebody asks what is the side effect of this drug. You can always say vomiting and nausea, because those are always the right answers, even for antiepileptics. And you can also say constipation very often, but these drugs have a certain side effect that causes dry mouth, mood changes, and drowsiness. And one of the side effects to always look out for are the severe causes of more and more infections, because these drugs tend to slow down the immune response of our organism, which can lead to more infections in this area. So, what to report? To be precise and to be short, you can report everything. So, if there is a known and unknown side effect, you can report it. If it happened a year ago, 10 years ago, you can report it. If you think that somebody else reported it, you can also report it. And you just need to know the symptoms of the patient, the drug that was used, and some kind of information for patients, and what it resulted in. It's just that simple. You can use reporting via pharmacy industry, or you can report via your regulatory authority, or you can talk to someone from this area that can make the report for you. In European Union, I already mentioned that the highest authority in this party is the European Medicines Agency, and it has its own body called PRAC. I think that you already heard of it. It's called the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, that gathers around and collects the side effects and makes decisions based on these side effects. So PRAC was the one that was responsible for removing the Folcodine drug from the market, because they saw that some patients had severe allergic reactions if they consumed Folcodine and went through anesthesia. So, regarding the world, we have also many deaths caused by drug use, and you can see versatile percentages in this area. So Europe is around 25%, and Asia here states 3 to 5%, but that is because less reporting. And you have already been familiar with the COVID disease and the drug reporting, so you have to take account in received vaccines and how many people have delivered side effects. So I think that receiving a vaccine is much better than receiving a side effect from this vaccine when we come to numbers. So side effect reporting is rising every year. You can see here that for vigilance there were 1.5 million individual case safety reports. You can report for computers, you can report from phone. Croatia is one of the first countries that invented this type of reporting, I think. And always remember, it's good to be awake in this system. So be the voice of reason tomorrow, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Konzev, for this excellent presentation. Now we'll move to the next presentation, once again about multiple sclerosis. But now we'll be talking not about the new treatment, but about medication adherence and I would like to give the floor to Professor Mitiakos.
The mouse died. Hello, good day. I'm Mitiakos. I'm professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy, University of Ljubljana. I'm also head of the Department of Social Pharmacy. And with such a nice introduction, so that you know that I'm an extremely important person, I would ask you to stand up. So the first purpose is to just stretch a bit, and the second one is to help me give a big applause to the organizers. So, as a professor, you cannot be more proud of your students than at such an event as this one. Particularly as somebody that was engaged as a student worldwide. While MS can be a challenging condition to manage, it is important to remember that patients with multiple sclerosis are not defined by their disease. They are individuals with unique stories, passions, and dreams, and it's our job as healthcare professionals to help them achieve those dreams. So quite a nice introduction for the start. Because I have this case of a patient, Martha is her name. She's 33-year-old female, and she presents I've learned today from the booklet that you already had a talk about multiple sclerosis, so you should recognize the symptoms already, and you should already know that most probably we are talking about multiple sclerosis, although there are quite some symptoms that are not necessarily really specific, and of course a proper clinical examination needs to be done. So you know the story behind, and you know that there are a number of symptoms, and that this is a disease that is quite challenging to the patient. For sure, most probably you know at least a person or two. So I know quite some, let's say, two relatively close persons, a colleague from the faculty, and another colleague from the students' years. So these were people that from time to time disappeared, and then they came back, and then now for some years we don't see them again. So most probably it is because most of the cases are also called relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis that affects 85% of all the patients, that typically present with relapses and remission periods. Of course, you have other diseases that you most probably learned this morning, and because I was asked to hurry up, because we only have 10 minutes left, I'll now skip most of my slides that I was preparing for several hours to the end. So basically, there are no curative treatments available for multiple sclerosis. There are a number of treatments. It's some goals to reduce the inflammation and relapses, but no real curative treatments. And apart from this, you have treatments that also present with the topic of my previous speaker. These are the adverse effects from flu-like symptoms of some traditional injectables, an anxiety with, for example, butyric acetate, to some newer cases as it is flushing and gastrointestinal upsets with dimethyl fumarate. So these adverse effects can be challenging and could affect also the way patients use their medicines. So I need to connect now these challenges with another challenge, which is medication adherence, which means the extent to which a person's behavior corresponds with agreed recommendations from a healthcare provider. And there are several dimensions that it affect. Here is an example of WHO presentation of 5 dimensions that are actually a kind of cause or risk for non-adherence. So as you can see from the healthcare system issues to social economic factors, some that are condition related or therapy related or patient related. When we talk about the multiple sclerosis, I would particularly like to expose adverse effects, over-optimistic expectations, delayed clinical efficacy, and depressions. Some others are relevant as well, but if I were already need to point something out that could be specific and related to non-adherence in patients with multiple sclerosis, it will be this. So if we have a quick view on them, so adverse effects you already seen. It's a number of them. So it could be quite challenging and it could affect the way patients use such medicines. Sometimes it could be difficulty in taking them, and particularly in connection with adverse effects such as fatigue, nausea, and flu-like symptoms. Of course, it could mean that it can affect the way the patient uses the medicines. Because of the particular condition, this could be even more challenging, yeah? Because they have problems in movement, perhaps even in the way they eat and so on. The second risk is an over-optimistic expectation, because the patient might have unrealistic expectations about the effectiveness, it could be even in regards to the safety. Or the delayed clinical efficacy. So the medicines needs a certain time to actually get the effect so that the patient can actually recognize them. So if this is not properly communicated, of course, it could be too early that the effect would actually appear and the expectations could not be met. And then it's also depression, as you could see as one of the symptoms connected with multiple sclerosis, and which is a common comorbidity in such patients and can make it difficult for them to then adhere again to the treatment regime. So there are some more, and I have a special workshop this afternoon, so we deal more exactly, specifically with medication adherence, so we leave such kind of things for later, to really buy you some more time. And this is one of 2 last slides, most probably the most important one. So if my topic is the medication adherence of patients with multiple sclerosis, most probably I should tell you something about what kind of adherence can we expect. Well, actually, on general, across the different diseases, there was a publication several years ago by WHO that is saying that the medication adherence is at around 50% across different diseases. This is not the case for multiple sclerosis because it is much, much higher. As you can see, it is 93% in the first year and 83% in the 5th year of observation. And this is coming from our recent research that we've done in Slovenia. on 316 patients. So 316, what does it mean? It is a kind of 10% of all the patients that you would meet at the moment in Slovenia. If it's around 3,000 patients at the moment. You can have a look at the adherence through another angle. So if 90% means that 90% of the time somebody has actually taken the medicine, you could also have a look at the share of patients that are adherent. And the adherent patients are defined that they have more than 80% of days actually covered. So we define the adherence as so the adherent patient as those that has more than 80% of days or uses actually covered, and you can see that the share of such patient is also nearly 70%, and that it is just slightly lower for peroral medicines and a bit higher for subcutaneous medicines. We could also have a look at another measure, which is persistence, which actually means time to discontinuation. And you could see here another story, that a substantial number of patients actually stopped taking a medication during a 5-year period. Actually, more than 80% of patients discontinued their treatment, with half of the patients discontinuing their treatment less than 10 years after the first dispensing. The persistence was higher with vetiver acetate and interferon beta, and lower with teriflunomide, fingolimod, and dimethyl fumarate that you have most probably done before. So to conclude, patients with multiple sclerosis have a specific challenge. So we have high adherence, so it's because most probably the disease is quite bothersome that the patient actually, when they get involved into the therapy, they actually manage it quite well. However, there's low persistence, so a huge number of patients actually stop medications, but the reasons for this could be searched in the appropriateness of therapy, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, in the adverse effects and so on. So most probably, if these patients are managed well, then the physicians are actually taking the action and changing the therapy and trying to find the one that will actually work for them. So thank you for today.
Thank you very much, Professor Kos. Now we will proceed to the panel discussion, and I would like to invite the speaker to join us. Since we are running out of time, we will ask one or two questions. So now maybe we could start with the questions from the audience. Are there any questions? I cannot see any questions. Okay, there is one.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. Dr. Martins, you have talked about pharmacovigilance and its importance in reporting adverse effects. However, we see that a great number of pharmacists, especially community pharmacists, shy away from reporting adverse effects. I would like to know if you know the reasons behind them shying away from reporting adverse effects. In addition to that, I have a sub-question. How do you envision the role of social media in reporting adverse effects? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Yes, I know some of the reasons. I think the first reason is the lack of time. I think everybody would agree. But when you come into it, it's not so much a time-consuming argument, I would say, because pharmacists are today, at least in my country, speaking for Bosnia and Herzegovina, are so much busy with the patients and the drug administration and preparing the drugs and talking to the patient, do you know how to take it, have you taken it before, and so on and so on. I think that if they hear it, they don't report side effects because of the lack of time and the not knowing how to report. That is our fault from the agency and from the regulatory authorities. And we completely say that that is our fault. We need to use those social media, as you mentioned, to promote the pharmacovigilance, I would say, awareness among healthcare workers. The second of them, I think, is fear, because they don't know what will happen next. They think that they will be prosecuted, they will be asked questions, they will be interviewed for something they reported. And we also did have one case in our country where a pharmacist reported a side effect that he didn't see for themselves, but a patient came in and told them, and you have to trust the patient in this process. And the marketing authorization holder called that pharmacist and said, how do you dare to report such a side effect if you haven't seen it? So we from the agency then took over and threatened, I use a so hard word. We talked to the marketing authorization holder and we explained the whole process, and we told them that it is forbidden for them to contact the primary source for this, because they have to take the responsibility that their drugs can cause certain side effects. So regarding your sub-question, I think that using the chat GPT AI could help immensely for pharmacists, and I have a workshop later that we will show cases like this using the chat GPT AI in helping with the pharmacovigilance process.
Thank you very much as well. There is one more question from the audience.
As pharmacists, even if we report, sometimes there's no alternative drug to that drug. So there's only in some countries, there's only restrictions and no withdrawal. What do you think about this? And I also have another question.
So when you report a side effect, I mentioned it in my when I was speaking. Don't expect for that drug to immediately be removed from the market. That is the least step in this whole process. So if you don't have any other drugs that you could recommend for this patient, and they have some severe side effects that they prevent them from using this drug in the future, the best thing is to call for the intervent import of drugs. This is a institution in our country, and I believe all around Europe, where such a country can import some drugs, especially for one patient. They don't have to be registered in the country. And I would like to state once again, if you report a side effect, don't expect that drug to be removed or to be some other corrective measures, because side effects need to be collected, need to be studied well, and the removal from the market is the last step in this process. We will do anything else but remove the drug, and if the drug is removed, that means that we have tried everything, and this is the last process.
Okay, can I continue? One more?
Yes.
I want to give an example from sputramin. I saw it induces manic episodes in some patients, And I saw in US and for instance in Turkey, it is withdrawn, yet it is sold on the internet. And as pharmacists, how can we prevent this? Like patients buy it from internet, and we cannot control this. We cannot check from a clinical perspective. What do you think about this?
First and foremost, let me say that I strongly believe that drugs can't be sold over the internet for patients. We have to determine drugs, and we have to determine supplements and vitamins and all other things. We know what a drug is. We have a drug list. We have a drug register. So for me, speaking for me, I believe the drugs can't be sold under the internet legally. So when it comes to illegal sellage of drugs and the delivering of drugs, I think that is the problem for the state, I would say, border control, and I think they do it effectively. At least in my country, they need a certification from the Agency of Medicines and Medical Devices to import drugs, and I think that is the practice in most countries. But as you mentioned in the first thing, it can cause such side effects in certain patients, so not in all patients. So I don't believe that most patients should be the victim of some other patients that develop these side effects, because side effects can have and mostly do have genetic backgrounds. So some patients will develop certain side effects, other won't. So why can't we let these patients that don't develop side effects go on and live a healthy life without any problems with their disease?
There's one last question from the public.
Thank you very much. I have one question. We've all unfortunately been witnesses to COVID-19 pandemic, and we saw a very rapid development of our vaccines. And my question is, the society reacted quite badly, in my opinion, because many people were pretty paranoid about what could happen after having this vaccine administered. And my question is, did you maybe notice a higher submission of adverse effect reports because of that?
I think I'm very popular today. I will need a glass of water. Okay, so regarding the COVID-19 practice, yes, we have seen a increase in reports regarding that, but I think that no significant increase regarding serious adverse events. So we have adverse events mostly with nausea and pain on the site of the administration of the vaccine. So that is for all of vaccines. And when we studied the amount of people that received COVID-19 vaccines, all of them, so we are talking now about the BioNTech, AstraZeneca, and so on. And when we studied the people that received, I would say, the usual vaccines such as Moparu and such other vaccines, we noticed that it was slightly lower, the side effects for COVID-19 vaccines. So yes, we have seen an increase, but that increase, first and foremost, is not significant in the statistical analysis, and second of all, we didn't have any vaccines earlier, so we can't compare now and maybe 10 years ago and so on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions as well. Now we'll be finishing this panel discussion. So big applause for our speakers. I would like to stress out that now we will proceed to lunch. So please, Group B and participants